Today, I'd like to talk about the 2017 Equifax data breach. Equifax is one of the three largest consumer credit reporting agencies in the United States. The company provides consumer credit and insurance reports to businesses like banks and credit unions. The reports include detailed information on credit and payment history of individuals. Hence, credit institutes could use the Equifax report to determine, for example, the amount of loan lending to a specific person. At the bottom of the slide is an example of the Equifax score in its credit report. The motivation for this study was the influence of this attack. Equifax is so big that it holds almost every American's credit history. During the data breach, more than 145 million private records of Americans were compromised, plus more than 17 million of international consumers' data. That is almost half of the US population. Compromised information includes consumers' name, social security number, address, and as well as their driver's license number, which could be used for identity theft. The data breach was so impactful that a lot of Americans had to worry about the identity theft for the rest of their life, and hundreds of thousands of credit cards had to be reissued from banks and credit unions. The breach was caused by a vulnerability found in an open source framework called Apache Struts, which is used by Equifax. In 2017, the framework was found to be vulnerable to remote code execution. This picture shows a general process of exploiting the vulnerability of remote code execution. First, the attacker wrote some malicious code and then injected the code into servers that use outdated Apache struts. Then the attacker could get control of those vulnerable servers and steal data from organization's database. Now let's take a look at the vulnerability itself. Here is the CVE number of the vulnerability. When the attacker sends a specific HTTP GET request to an outdated Apache Struts server, the server will fail to handle exception correctly, which allows remote attacker to execute arbitrary commands via a crafted content type header. Here, the attacker made the server run the ipconfig command, and the server output is at the bottom of the slides. The attacker in the data breach could run other commands that actually helps them to control the Equifax server. The two major motivations of the attack are financial gain and espionage. On average, an entry of personal identifiable information worth is $2 on the dark web. With more than 160 million records, the hacker could receive around $320 million, an amount that could allow me to pay for my UNC tuition for thousands of years. The US government later on accused an entity related to Chinese government of data breach. If Chinese government has information on more than half of Americans, the Chinese government could use information to support China's long-term strategies. Here is a detailed timeline of the attack. On March 7, 2017, the remote code execution of vulnerability was announced by Apache Foundation. Also, the Apache Struts has an update that patches the vulnerabilities on that day. 3 days after the announcement, experts found that there were hackers trying to scanning a lot of websites and try to find the system to exploit based on the vulnerabilities. Equifax was informed of the vulnerability shortly, and they did several security scans to find if their system has such vulnerabilities on the Apache Struts. However, the security scans did not find the vulnerabilities, and the company failed to update their Apache Struts to the newest version. On May 12, 2017, hackers gained access to Equifax servers and extracted 160 million entries of data. It was until after 76 days that Equifax discovered the breach and shut off the exploit. One of the reasons that takes Equifax so long to find the anomaly was the device used to monitor the subnet of network relates to the hacked machine has been inactive for 19 months due to an expired security certificate. On August 2nd, 2017, there were 1.8 million insider trading with company executives involved, including the chief information officer. On September 7th, 2017, Equifax announced the data breach to the public. One of the consequences of the announcement was Equifax's share dropped to 13% after that, and the company's 3 executives also resigned, including the company's CEO, CIO, and CSO. Equifax also deployed new endpoint security tools so that they cannot miss the vulnerability like that in the near future. And there were numerous lawsuits against Equifax after the data breach. After nearly 2 years of the attack, Equifax had a $575 million settlement with the Federal Trade Commission. The settlement requires Equifax to spend at least $300 million on affected consumers, and the company will also pay $175 million to 84 states, including District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. And the Equifax will also pay $100 million civility penalty to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Though Equifax did provide free credit monitoring to consumers, the service is only free for 1 year, and the consumer has to pay a lot of money to continue such service. There are 3 major conclusions I'd like to share based on the data breach. First, defense is actually harder than the attack. We can see that even for an open source framework like Apache Struts, writing security code is hard. There's still lots of vulnerability involved in such famous framework, and even the Apache Foundation has patched the vulnerabilities. It's still really hard for the foundation to let those organizations to defend against the attacks. As we can see in the Equifax example, although the company did know that there was such vulnerability, they actually neglect the fact that they had the Equifax, they had the Apache Struts server. Also, the data breach reveals there was some problem with the privacy policy of the credit reporting industry. According to Federal Trade Commission, consumer cannot opt out of Equifax data collection, and those affected customers need to worry about the identity theft for the rest of their lives. It would be great if consumers have the right to not share data with Equifax as well as other credit reporting agencies. The third lesson learned from the data breach was the company needs to find a balance between the growth and security. Although it looks really simple to update the Apache Struts, and update will help the company to prevent the breach, the breach is also about how a company should pay attention to the security. The former Equifax CEO Richard Smith had an aggressive growth strategy leading to acquisition of multiple companies, and the growth brought increasing complexity of Equifax IT system and expanded the data security risk. With such complex system, there was an execution gap between the IT policy and the operation. This is also the restriction that the company's implementation of other security initiatives in a comprehensive and timely manner. I hope the breach could help the company learn how to balance between the growth and security in the future. Here are the 2 questions that I'd ask to my audience. First, what action can Equifax take to prevent such events from happening in the future? Second, remote code execution is a violation of what principles of writing secure code? And here are my references. Thank you for your attention.